Ready to do this?
Yes,
Stephanie,
let's do
showtime.
this.
Oh. So what are we talking about this week?
Yes, this week we're talking about smart cities. And I think since we've all been in lockdown and quarantine, the cities have all kind of been pulled in a million different directions. But, what's the impact of COVID-19 and to cities, even on a standalone basis? But when you think about smart city projects, are those going to continue? Um, what are we expecting to see based on now? A lot of cities have budgets have been dwindled, right? They don't have that tax revenue coming in, and they don't even know where that's going, because as businesses start to open, there are still a wave of people that aren't ready to go out there. So, what does that do to tax revenue dollars, which is really their foundation for their overall budget? And what happens with their overall technology budget and all the projects that they've had in place? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and maybe dig into some specific things that are happening within your own cities or things that you're hearing.
Yeah.
So maybe we want to start off by talking about kind of the impact. I mentioned about the city budgets. That's the foundation, but I think a lot of projects that are out there aren't even relying on the city budget. So I'd love to get any of your feedback around what you're seeing in your own city, and what you're hearing about kind of city dollars or city revenue, and some of the impact that you think about priorities as well. Are they changing their priorities? Because why are we focusing on smart cities when we really need to be talking about, citizen safety? So anybody want to jump in and talk about what you think? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think those are all great bullet points for our discussion today, but definitely you mentioned prioritization. I think there's been a lot of prioritization around public health, right? And emergency response. And I think those are the critical requirement areas that are driving a lot of the investment in technology. Now, whether or not we're actually investing in smart city infrastructure is another thing, right? I don't see too much of that. And that's one of the topics I'm actually going to be addressing with 5G Americas today. I have an interview with Chris Pearson, who's the CEO of that group, and really trying to figure out, well, what are some of those things that we could do in a emergency response capability, or taking that agenda and driving some long-standing innovations as well as infrastructure build out going forward, right? Because what is evident is that we don't necessarily have the critical infrastructure to deal with these types of pandemics, or at least pandemics on this scale. And so, it's a great question, but I think we're still dealing with the initial shock, right? Even though we're like 3 months into this thing, we're still dealing with the initial shock of realizing that COVID-19 is in the United States, right? And in San Diego, we're still, kind of in reactive mode. I wouldn't say that we're necessarily in innovation mode, which is, I think, what we need. And that's how we're going to get those smart cities and the capabilities as well as the infrastructure that are going to make smart cities what they promise to be.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you there. I'd say too, I try to look at it and put myself in their shoes. I kind of throw all those other projects and priorities kind of in the background now, right? But, if you think about, what's really going to be beneficial now is any project that helps with contact tracing, citizen safety, building safety, cleaning, disinfecting. So if we can think about smart technology that can support or aid in that, maybe that will give a little bit of a bump in priority, or anything having to do with helping automate or track patient safety, or those cases that are out there. So I think that we're going to also see, because budgets are so tight, I think that cities are going to really flock to solutions that help them with budget management or help them with reducing costs around a given, project. And if it's focused around cost containment or reducing fees or helping citizens or helping with safety and emergency response, I think all of those kind of rolled into one. That's going to be a big driver for, and they're not going to be thinking about technology, but if there are solutions out there that come to play or come to mind with companies that might have something to support part of their efforts, then I think that might come secondary, because right now they're thinking about how do we actually get our arms around keeping everyone safe. So you're right. It's just the priorities, I think, are going to change and shift dramatically. Everything that we were working on around infrastructure that may not be as important right now. It just isn't.
Yeah, definitely the big build outs, right? The grand schemes and the big projects are gonna be real. They're going to be broken up or completely canceled. I totally agree with that.
Or maybe building automation, building management solutions that help with HVAC. They have technologies out there that are emitting UAV lighting that's helping supposedly sanitize buildings or help sanitize during the off time when people are not in the office. So maybe some things that support with infrastructure safety or building safety, because I think a lot of offices, as you go back in, I kind of see two sides of it. They're either going to keep people at home, so when their lease comes up, they're not going to be renewing those leases, or they're going to look at the layout of their offices and go, okay, what do we need to do to push people apart a little bit further and maybe restructure the way we have our offices set up. So maybe gone are the days of those open, cool offices that were really promoting sharing and all of that. And, a lot of face-to-face contact. I don't know. I mean, you start to think about all the trends that were happening. Does that change, the way, public buildings and public, offices are going to be run, and the interface? I think that they're definitely embracing digital, ever pushing as much service-wise or government services more and more online, so they don't have to actually have face-to-face.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hey. The dog
no way.
I love it.
I don't even have a dog, but he ate it, and I had to chase him.
Well, you're gonna have to raise it by saying something, because I don't think the video got into the frame. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There we go. The dog. Yeah.
That's nice handwriting.
Thank you. I have lead by example.
Wow.
Glad you can make it this morning. Hopefully you have your coffee.
Yes.
Rob, you're going to say something?
I don't want to sound really pessimistic or anything, but, I think we can all maybe agree. I don't want to speak for anyone else. Smart City has been a tough road in the best of times already. Lots of great ideas. Almost none of them have been realized. Working with City Hall, working with bureaucracy, working with, I don't have budget for this. That was how it already was in the good times.
Right.
So, and now we're in a free fall. And, I've heard the word reactive a lot, and that's exactly what's happening. So as opposed to long-term thinking and planning and investment, that has just evaporated. Everybody is like, reacting. Hair on fire right now.
Right.
So the budgets that were already not there are now gone. And they're now massive deficits. And the states, the big cities in the states are already reaching out to the feds to get mega bailouts, because the states are all going underwater in ways they haven't ever before.
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty ugly out there for a long time around smart cities. At least a coordinated effort. A lot of all the thousands of use cases that we've all talked about for years. I don't know.
I read somewhere where we were talking about Sidewalk Labs and how, Google. They essentially just shut that down. And someone, I was reading some article, and I wish I had the name, but they said, if Google Labs, efforts to privatize and really work on that project for Toronto was closed down, do you think anyone else with funds are going to be able to support that effort? Yeah. I mean, the biggest company in the world has said, no, we're closing that down. So think about all the other small companies who have been placing their bets on smart cities and have put a lot of their efforts in their go-to-market around city services and solutions. I think it's going to be tough. And I think that you're right, Rob. I think we're going to see a lot of companies that did place their bets there that are going to close as well. And unless they are able to pivot and do something completely different, we're going to see a lot of technology companies close.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Lots of them are all going to go out of business for sure. Even before this started, just IoT in general, the whole nice to have IoT stuff is a non-starter. It already had to be, you can't live without IoT projects are the only ones that have a chance of surviving. And that was before this started. Now it's just, we really have to dig deep for the can't live without, oh my God, gotta have this, whatever it happens to be, type of scenario, to have a chance. Cause you're right, the money's gone. So, lots of great ideas, how things work out when there's no money. Great ideas will just sit there on the shelf, right? And we'll go, wow, that really sucks. That's too bad. So what is the activity we do see in cities? And yeah, it's first responders, it's hospitals, it's ambulances, fire, that kind of stuff. It's not modernization of mass transit.
Right.
It's not modernization of all these, all that's just come to a halt. And so, you have to think about the sectors that are reeling from this and are reacting. And also, of course, as usual, these things come along. It's just a wake-up call to how wholly unprepared we all have been for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. I think maybe the one thing that might come out of this, and this is talking with a couple of colleagues, is that the American Telehealth Association has seen an explosion. Well, first of all, a lot of the regulations and compliance they threw that out the door because doctors needed to see patients remotely. And so a lot of the requirements that are normally in place, they released all of those, and they've allowed telehealth to really continue without all the barriers that they've seen before. So out of everything, the at-home healthcare, telehealth, remote care, and all of that, that will be embraced like crazy. And maybe even some of the restrictions that are in place now will stay. And so physicians and nurse practitioners and clinicians will be able to practice very differently than they have before. So that, you think about cities and wanting to protect their citizens and wanting to keep people safe and make sure that, especially the elderly and those that really can't even get out to go get tested. They're looking at solutions to kind of more long-term on how do we really care for folks. If we have another wave, we need to still have a way to so telehealth may end up being an area that, we've talked about that industry for a long time, but it actually might take off even further because of what we're experiencing.
Yeah, I agree. But I wanted to interject here really quickly. One of the things I think has been challenging the progress in smart cities is the fact that, everyone's talking about the business case. What's the business case? What's the business case? And the thing is that may fundamentally be the wrong question to be asking, because if you think about a lot of the services that a city provides, it's public, it's for the public good. So when we put a business lens to the problem, I think you get the wrong answer, right? Because think about the postal service. It runs a deficit, or it runs in the red simply because there are people out in the middle of Alaska that still need to get mail, right? That's sort of their American right. And it costs a lot of money to get that one piece of celery, or if you're shopping and you're looking for delivery, or for that piece of mail, it takes a lot of energy, time, and money to get that delivered to that individual sitting out in the middle of some cabin in Alaska. And so that, I think, is a fundamental mindset shift that needs to be made. And now that we have COVID, there's this really urgent burning platform that can drive some innovative thinking that I don't think is happening, right? And so there's things that we can do today that could eventually be sort of the mainstay of an infrastructure that may be the foundation for smart cities, right? Or even a smart nation. And I think this is one of the things that China gets. They're investing in the infrastructure for smart cities. Not only have they run fiber everywhere, and they already have fiber literally going to every single lamppost in that country, in most, a lot of the newer cities as well as the older cities. They are committed to the broader value proposition for their country of having things smart and intelligent, right? And I think from a competitive perspective, we need to start thinking in that way as well. But I don't think that the Chinese government is necessarily looking at it as an investment where you're going to make a return on investment for the government, right? Or the city. It's going to be more of a broadly shared benefit for the economy as a whole. If you want to call it a digital economy, that's, I think, we need to kind of adopt their thinking a little bit, even though we kind of shy away from doing that, right? Because, they're communist China, but they're getting stuff done. And we're still sitting here looking for ROI in something where we probably shouldn't be looking for ROI. We should just do it.
I think from and I know I chimed in late, so if hopefully, let me see if this comes out.
Dog ate homework.
I missed a ton. I think from a technology perspective, I think your comment holds water. Unfortunately, because the way of government, in China, the way some of the things are utilized, from terms of privacy, from terms of censorship, they're not going to fly here. But you already made that comment. It's not about that, right? But one thing that they seem to have gotten right, and so has Dubai, so has the center of Abu Dhabi, is that they said, okay, here's the thing. We're going to build things, and we want them to be smart and intelligent. And one of the things that they're all going to need is some sort of really fast, really wicked connectivity. Yeah. So Rob, you're in charge of this. Mark, you're in charge of that. Stephanie, in charge of this. Figure out what it is that you're going to do, because we're digging trenches. And because it was done with agreement from all of these stakeholders, from public safety, from healthcare, from industry, et cetera, then it becomes a platform. And I make that comment, and if I had more coffee, I would sound more agitated and angry about this. Because you and I have had chats like these one-on-one, Leonard, but it comes down to a city, a government, a municipality, a private stakeholder just not being in the same room, not having aligned outcomes where everyone benefits. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have that, if we don't have the multiple stakeholder agreements, mm-hmm. then we're back to, well, where can we do this where no one's going to say no? Well, China, because again, the government functions in such a way. Because these are things that we need, but it's not a technology; it's here.
Yeah, but you know what? Yeah. I mean, we hear that a lot. We can't do it because we're not China. But the thing is that not necessarily taking the Chinese model of doing things. We've done incredible stuff. We've had NASA, right? We've been to the moon. I mean, we went to the moon almost 50 years ago. We've done these incredible things. Yeah, we Eisenhower built out our freeway systems, our interstate freeway systems or highway systems. So there's these incredible infrastructure things that we've done where at the time it didn't seem like there was going to be an ROI necessarily, but there was a commitment to critical infrastructure. And I think that kind of thinking is missing because we've lost the public good mindset. We're so focused on the profit motive, we can't think of these investments as being beneficial without somebody making a profit. And I think that really, and you know, when you look at how the smart city discussion transitioned from what originally was, which was sort of this pie in the sky stuff, to now we need to get real, it went straight to profit motive. What's the business case? What's the business case? And while value is important, you need to express and agree on what value is in terms that are relevant for, you know, public infrastructure, because that's really what a smart city is, right?
Yeah, but I think this is a sales problem. At least the vision that I have is that always the same companies are getting these smart cities or these big technological projects. So I think that at some point, companies or even city halls or governments are tired to have always the same companies getting as much profit as possible from them and from the citizens. So I think we reached this point where they say stop. No, we don't want to get not stolen, but on this type of projects that usually don't work, are useless. Absolutely. So this is.
I agree, Mark. I'd say too that one of the things that I've noticed is that citizens definitely are pushing back, which is great because a lot of when private companies come in, I mean, their end game is to make a profit in the end, right? Or leverage that infrastructure for other services that they might sell down the road. And so citizens are putting their foot down because, like you said, Leonard, we're talking business cases, but now I think that because of the citizens are really starting to push back, which is what happened at Sidewalk Labs. They were really concerned. Well, who owns my data? Yeah. Right? Citizens were like, who owns my data? So now citizens are really putting their foot down and they're developing their own coalitions and they're fighting back. Mm-hmm. And so essentially cities realize we need to lead with the citizen first. So a citizen first approach. And I don't think that they're going to get anywhere unless they have a citizen first approach on any of their projects, because if you don't involve the citizens in the community from the beginning, then you lose buy-in. I know you talked about stakeholders. Yeah, I mean, we can't forget about the most important stakeholder, which is the citizen. So I think that mind shift is already happening, but now it's even more, right? Even more important is citizens are, they're going to be concerned about safety. And when they're walking the streets or entering any of the facilities or buildings that the governments run, it needs to be with their safety in mind. So
when you do get it in, Leonard, that comment, the last two from Mark and Stephanie, that's the money shot. You can cut me out. This is when it's wow.
Stop doing that. You're not the lowest common denominator. You don't get cut out. That's not what this is about. Okay,
but I have been working on a smart city project a lot of years, and I got we are all technologists here, but I got into this mindset that we should stop thinking about technology when we talk about smart cities, because there are some solutions that don't need technology to have a smarter city or a more intelligent city. So. And that's something that I learned now working on these smart cities projects, at least in Barcelona, that some decisions don't need a lot or a very expensive technology, to get a solution, to get a smarter solution. And having said that, let me tell you what happened in Barcelona last month. It has been funny for me, at least. I took my car on Saturday to go to collect some food. And actually, half of the streets where I drove, they reduced the number of lanes and they put bike lanes. So half of the city now, it's they reduced the number of lanes for cars. But yeah, that's really interesting, no? I mean, but they did it during the lockdown, or most of that was during the quarantine.
That's one way to keep people off the streets.
Yeah.
And half of the streets were and then now on Saturdays and Sundays they are closing half of the city, so no cars, so neighbors can meet up or I don't know what in social distancing probably.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a smart city initiative or not. Kind of crazy because maybe there will be more pollution, or the same, but they are aggregated in different places. But there are solutions. What I learned is that there are solutions that are not technical, and maybe the technologists, we should think on less technology or less technology solutions, for this smart city approach.
Yeah, you're right. It boils down to solutions. That's absolutely key, and it's something, Rob, you and I talk about all the time. It's don't engineer the IoT solution or the application of IoT to the solution. I think you have to. IoT is not necessarily the solution; it just enables the solution. I think that's something that technologists and folks in the IoT world, they struggle with that a little bit, right? Because it all has to be about gadgets and connecting things, and then calling Rob and saying, "Hey, man, how do I connect this stuff and make it really smart?"
Legos.
And then now on a serious comment regarding.
What? That wasn't serious? That was totally serious.
No, my last comment was half serious, but the approach of having the conversation with with the cities that this is not for a profit center. This is, to Stephanie's point, this is citizen-centric services. And I mean, like, I've been noodling on it, for the past 3 minutes. I mean, it's a change of mindset.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Because, I have a public water and wastewater and gas and electric utility that one's privately owned, but the rest is taxpayer funded. So I expect them to upgrade the water main and come and trim trees because we pay for these services. And if they make money, that's great. But having that approach that it's the citizen centricity and not profit from the eyes of the city, like I think that would change things. And then to Mark's comments on the bike lane bid. So they took advantage of an unprecedented situation to run a proof of concept at a time that is the only time that you could do it. And now, if you're walking, down, Las Ramblas or Paseo de Gracia, and all of a sudden you have all this space, it solves for now all of us have walked in Barcelona. For social distancing purposes, the sidewalks would get congested. So that problem doesn't exist. Now, will this lead to permanent legislation? Would this be an extension of super blocks? Would this be to like, hey, 4 weekends for the next couple of years, this is what's going to happen. And then it becomes the new normal because there's no technology there. That's citizen centricity design, some city planner, some, actual experience of the user, and then, send it to the Senate or however it works in Spain, send it to get approved. And all those things, so I can stop talking, are just citizen centricity, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, and by the way, I think you mispronounced all those streets.
Las Ramblas y Paseo de Gracia, absolutely not. In Spanish, they were accurate. I would not try anything in Catalan.
Okay.
But in Spanish,
they're well pronounced in Spanish.
No, I was going to say too, I wonder, it's a good point that you made though, because you think about New York with, they just really took off and had just a massive amount of cases and just went into havoc, right? That city, no matter what, just didn't have a way to make themselves less congested before they were actually, we all know that this virus was running around in January, maybe even December before that.
Yeah.
But how congested that overall city is when you walk from point A to point B, gosh, you have to wonder, would it have been safer if we would have known then to actually keep the vehicles off some of those main congested downtown areas or Wall Street areas and have, more walking and more room for people to kind of spread out. I don't know. I mean, you think about the cities, the metros that had
The metro is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's stuffed on there.
This great thing that gets people around town, which is better than cars, ended up being our worst enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
So many people stuffed together on a train.
Yeah, but you know what? Speaking of what do you call it? Citizen centricity. That's a tough sell, though, right? And I think instead of having a business case, you need to have a public case. You know, and one of the challenges I think you have with moving citizens is really getting them to understand the notion of public good, and that is what makes smart cities that much more difficult. And I think I think we might have figured out what the problem is and possibly an answer. It's not what is your business case, what is your public case or case for public good. And that takes a level of awareness and maybe even education, if I dare say that, of the citizenry to understand and think forward, because we've already talked about how now we've taken a much more prioritized short-term view of things. Maybe it is the role of leadership to force people to think forward, right? And then take this opportunity, what I call like sort of this crucible of innovation that we have at the moment, use that opportunity to think forward, and then maybe even commit to building some stuff out that will eventually become like the TSA. You know, after 9/11, we had TSA. It's been around for since 9/11. So
yeah, but that's
there are some cities that are doing some really smart things. I'm sorry, Mark. With what is it, 311, the information lines that folks call in, where they're piping in, and then they have suggestions, right, from the citizens that are piping in, they're coming in, but they're adding that to databases, and they're looking at correlations of issues that are found with roadways, with congestion, with whatever, right, whatever the complaint is, and they're looking at that and identifying some of the big hubs of problems or issues as, you know, that might be a way. But if we don't have some kind of interactive platform feed coming in from the citizens and having a way of seeing what's on their minds, what's causing them havoc, and having, you know, that when they go from point A to point B in my city, you know, but there are platforms out there. There are also some companies, some software companies that are providing this for free to cities, and as a way to almost pull in hubs and identify opportunities and challenges, and so there are some early companies that are out there that are doing this, but citizens, I mean, the cities aren't embracing that as much.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you get them to understand that this kind of information feed could really be beneficial to your citizens, and when you get buy-in from them, some of these projects that you think are never going to happen, they might happen.
Yeah, but take into account that New York wouldn't be New York without their citizens, right? If you put the Los Angeles citizens into New York would be a complete different city, right? So so the cities are about the citizens. And another thing that it's really interesting, and Leonard mentioned, it's a culture, right? So as a technologist, we want to reproduce projects, right? So okay, this project worked in whatever in Qatar, so let's start selling this everywhere, right? But yeah, you have to understand that Singapore is run different than Tokyo or Paris or London, New York, etc. So and it's not just tiny details, right? It's public transportation. It's completely different in every city. Distances are different, etc. So it's tricky. It's not just a software that you can replicate easily. From one city to the other. Citizens are different, culture is different, etc., etc.
And we can't forget about the rural communities and the smaller towns or townships, because I think a lot of times when you think about smart cities, all the energy and efforts and all the PR and media goes to these big cities. But there are some small towns that are doing way better with smart city projects because they don't have the bureaucracy and the hiccups when it comes to, taken 13 months to decide on which project to go with. It just, they have a little bit more energy to push things through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. But now in smaller towns, especially with what's going on with coronavirus, there a lot of smaller towns, especially in Texas, they don't have the cases. They don't have the growth, the debt. They have a lot of towns, a lot of county. We actually have counties in Texas that have 0 cases. And we have a lot of, a huge bulk of counties that have 0 deaths. And so they, it's easy to social distance when you live on a ranch or you're out in the middle of nowhere like I am. But there are other towns that are like that. So it's like you can't think. I see a lot of folks, talk about smart city projects, but they forget about, the big small towns that are just as robust and need solutions too.
Yeah,
there is not enough profit.
Also the marketing. If we Google, smart city, enter a random word. The marketing, the SEO that comes out is point solutions. Smart city parking, smart city lighting, smart city. I don't know. Just go on and on and on and on. That's definitely what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Point solutions, and not all the time. Some of the time in the aggregate, because you're right. I'm in the suburbs, and it's nice. We've got space, but in terms of
smart city infrastructure, I'm like,
we don't have any.
Yeah.
We're okay. It would be nice if the feed would tell me, before Corona, a long time ago, when I would drive anywhere, it would be nice to know what's the best way to get into another, which is basically Google Maps or Waze or whatever. But I would like to think that in a macro view, that the city of Portland should have better traffic advice than any of these, Googles or Waze or whatever, if they took the suburbs and, in consideration. And for those of you who haven't been in Portland, Oregon, so I'm already in the suburbs, but I drive 20 minutes from here and I'm in the country.
Which suburb are you in?
I'm in Southwest, so in Beaverton.
Yeah, I know Beaverton.
Oh,
yeah. Another 20 minutes, we're in Wilsonville.
My wife's parents live down there, so we're in the Portland area all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'll come by and say hi when we're allowed. I'll just drive down I-5.
Yes, well, we can even do social distancing meal, Rob. You're
yes.
We practice this.
We can do that. You know what? I want to just say something really quick. You're right. There's the profit motive. There's the whole capitalism versus Chinese 5-year plans, building ghost cities and stuff like that. I totally get it. The reality is, and I can only speak for the U.S. I'm not going to speak for anywhere else. It's the chaos of capitalism. Cities are all created by private enterprise. They're not created by municipalities. The municipality, the idea of city government, all that comes afterward. All those skyscrapers, all that land rush, all that, it was all by private enterprise. That's the reason they came there. That's the reason the city took the shape it took. That's the reason why neighborhoods were built 100% private. The city was trying to go, oh God, we got to put together some kind of government here. Oh, we need to have rules. We need to have restrictions. How do we get water? That is always secondary. And that's just how it is. And that's why I think of the chaos of capitalism. I'd hear that term when I think of India, giant, democracy, and it's chaotic, and they struggle getting things done, and they look across the border at China, who's just marching down the road getting things done. Well, it's because we have different philosophies. And so the ultimate smart city is a greenfield project. Electricity, fiber, building gleaming skyscrapers, and it's all done, and it's just perfect. And we all know that would be difficult to have that work in the U.S. and lots of other places just because of how we operate. I'm not saying we can't change, but that's how these things get built. And so, but the citizenry as being the ultimate stakeholder in the common good, while it seems like that's in the background, man, there's personalities in City Hall. People get elected. They all have their own agendas. They're saying they're doing it for the public good. The same guy who's railroading tons of bike lanes through the city is getting reamed by the people who say, now the traffic's worse because I can't drive my car because all these crazy bicycle guys.
Don't forget the scooters.
There's always something, right? It's always this is always happening.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Stephanie, the rural thing out in the country, that's such a big deal. I didn't really think about it a lot until several years ago. I went to it was like it was out in Colorado in the mountains. It was some wireless whatever conference, and it was about wireless ISPs and getting WISPs and getting connectivity out to some of these places, which in some cases is really, really hard. And you realize that the foundation of a smart town or a smart county or a smart whatever, electricity, connectivity, it starts with there. And you're finding out a lot of these rural places, sometimes depending on where you are, the only place they had connectivity was at the public library.
Right.
Coffee shop. Yeah. And initially, before it was all about, we need connectivity to do all this cool stuff, it was about education, actually. We need to make sure our kids going to school can get access to the internet and, all be connected. And it's a struggle. I think right now, don't we have some possible legislation or whatever, as far as, it seems like we have a new bailout every month going through Congress. And maybe one of them is going to include massive funding, kind of like the massive rural electrification program that happened a million years ago that gave everyone electricity no matter where they lived. Maybe we'll get something like that with connectivity and 5G and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But those are like the baseline, right? That's like the baseline, setting the table. And then we build stuff on top of that, right? We build our solutions,
Yeah, like for me personally, when I first started my company like 15 years ago, the only option that I had for internet at my home was satellite internet. And I mean, that was it. Now we have these WISPs, you're right, that are coming around, and then, you got to have, you had to have direct line of sight with their antenna towers, or you had to be in close proximity. But, it was like your options are build this monstrosity of an antenna on your ranch and it's going to be $2,000, or wait for the WISPs to come in and they're going to be putting antennas in and around the rural area. And if you can get close enough, you can get a good signal. Well, we finally had someone come in to do that. But, it's a highly competitive thing. But in Texas, there are a lot of WISPs, and they're providing a good amount of services, and, they generate great amounts of revenue. And it's funny because it's like a couple of years ago, I heard AT&T was really going to try to get into that business because they saw all of these regional wireless companies that were coming in and making a good amount of money. And they're like, why aren't we doing that? But they just never could serve the rural America. So they've never been successful at it. So I think that we're going to have these WISPs for a long time. And, AT&T is like, we're 8 miles from fiber, right? So, and we don't have the population out in this area to ever generate a business case for an AT&T to build out this way. So they never will. And I've talked to the engineers about it, and, it's a long shot, right? But you're right, Rob. If without infrastructure, without fiber, without high-speed internet, you really can't do most of these projects that revolve around some kind of technology base. But to Marc's point, you're right. A lot of smart city solutions have nothing to do with technology at all, and we don't need it. I think sometimes we're throwing technology at some solutions that don't need it at all. So I think there's a lot of that going on as well.
Maybe we should talk about that on the next podcast around smart cities. We're like at 50 minutes, so this is a really long one.
A good amount of content.
I think we have our groove now. This is great, and but we want to save some material for the future, right? So, but anyways, I think why don't we call it a wrap, because I'm out of coffee. See, I need a refill.
That's what it really is all about.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I'm not wearing pants underneath the screen here, and so I need to get up to get coffee.
#TMI.
boxer shorts.
Yeah. So why don't we call it a wrap for this week, and we'll see you next week, right?
Sounds good.
All right,
Guys.
have a good week.
Have a good one.